Hey Void, how you doing today? I know it's been a little while since I've talked to you, but I'm lazy. That's really all there is to that. I just kept watching things, but kept putting off sitting down to talk about them, so here we are. Let's get a couple done to catch back up. Alright, back September, October, last year, I ended up reviewing the new 2021 version of Candyman. The reboot. I mean, it played itself like it was going to be a entire reboot or remake, but it more has ended up being a follow-up, so... And I really enjoyed it. But it had occurred to me at the time that I hadn't actually reviewed the original 1992 Candyman, so... Finally, as the new one comes to DVD, they happen to conveniently package it with the original, so... Finally gave me easy access. I know the Candyman's not exactly hard to find on streaming, but I like to own shit. So here we are. And Candyman has to be one of my favorite slashers, and I am on board with a lot of the old school ones. Love Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th has a campy soft spot. Don't watch Child's Play nearly as much as I'd like to. Halloween has got to be one of my favorite movies, period. But Candyman, there's something about it that just really sets it apart, and I think that's just the tone and mood. All the other ones have a certain energy about them, I think, that's a lot different than what Candyman conjures up. And I think that's due to the almost gothic fairy tale vibe that Candyman gives off. Alright. The soundtrack is haunting and amazing. It's right up there with Halloween for some of my favorite horror soundtracks. So, this one, it's Tony Todd's breakout role. He was pretty fresh off doing the 1990 version of Night of the Living Dead, and was cast in this one. I think originally they were trying to do someone else. I can't remember who exactly was up for the role. It might have even been like a... I can't remember who it was, but they decided that they were essentially too short. And ended up deciding on Tony Todd because he's a big guy. And I'm glad they did, because that haunting voice of his in here is just perfect. Okay, plot. So, this one's follows Virginia Madsen, starring as Helen Lyle, as she and one of her friends are essentially going for their masters. They're doing a big study on urban legends and how those kind of influence the culture around them. And they hear them discussing a couple different urban legends, and one of them that she's finds out about is the Candyman legend, which is one that she was relatively unfamiliar with. But the more people she talks to, it seems to be focused around the nearby projects area known as Cabrini Green, which is essentially the wrong side of the tracks. It's the rundown, the ghetto, the projects. So, apparently, stepping out of line down there, or saying Candyman 5 times into a mirror, will call the vengeful spirit of Candyman down upon you. Well, the more she finds out about this one, the more intrigued she gets, as she finds out that Cabrini Green was modeled on her own home, and one of the murders that was attributed to the Candyman, actually, she believes she's figured out how it happened, and pretty much takes the supernatural element out of it, as the apartments are connected, and him appearing through the mirror was, well, literally coming through a hole in the wall behind the mirror. Okay, easy. And she even says Candyman in the mirror 5 times, and nothing happens. So she goes back and forth and does some investigations, gets harassed by people there, meets a young mother-to-be who's not used to white people coming around her area, so is a little defensive at first, but then kind of warms to Helen and her friend, and finally, she believes she stumbles upon where some the then where the person claiming to use the Candyman legend is holed up, guided by a young kid, which she gets essentially assaulted by gang members, but in doing so proves it was just a guy holding a hook that was using the Candyman legend to essentially strike fear and run the gangs. So, having broken this up and proved to the kid that Candyman's not real, she considers her work done and will have a really interesting part for her thesis. Until Candyman himself shows up, indicating that he was called, that he decided to show up to her because she was not content with simply the story. She had to interfere with his congregation. Candyman, as he puts it himself, exists in rumor. So he lives without having the burden of having to actually live. So he essentially needs to rekindle his legend because of the damage she's dealt to it, and has decided that she is going to help him. She will be his victim. And around her, bodies begin now suddenly piling up, all pointing that she is the one who's behind it, from killing a dog and making the baby of one of the people in Cabrini Green vanish. When that isn't enough, her friend comes back to visit her and ends up killed by until she winds up completely in an asylum. All the while, Candyman's still haunting her, trying to get her to allow him to take her away, so they will forge a new legend. The movie's a very fascinating send-up of urban legends, and this one kind of how they can literally take on a life of their own and will fight for that life if it's thrown into jeopardy. Candyman also has this gothic romance kind of element going to it, as the chemistry between the Candyman and Helen it's there, though it's a strange feeling. And it's just really the aura the movie gives off that really draws me into Candyman. Trying to figure out where to rate this one. The gore effects are a bit minimal because there's not too much on screen, but when they are there, they are definitely well done. The music is very highly ranked, and I don't have any problems with any of the acting, so this one I'm going to rank very highly. I think I'm actually going to give the original Candyman 9 MacGuffins. It's not exactly a life-changing movie, but it is one well worth checking out, and it definitely holds up. If anything, the racial tones of it are more relevant today than even back then. Now, there's been some comments on Clive Barker, who wrote the original story, The Forbidden, pretty much utilizing racial tensions to pretty much stoke a horror element. But oddly enough, his original story was more about classism and actually had no racial elements at all. It was the director who pretty much reset this one from England to America that decided to go with that aspect to essentially draw attention to it. Sometimes it's not the most elegantly handled, but the messages of how people are treated differently are well examined. So yeah, it's a personal favorite. Highly recommend. Alright, see you guys soon.